I'm still Dave Wilson. I still work as TREX for HEAnet, the Irish National Research and Education Network. And the invitation to throw things at me if I speak too fast still stands. But we are behind time, so I will try and get through this in reasonable time. This isn't going to be a very technical talk. This is one of the least technical talks I have ever done. It's not a talk about our V6 deployment. That's sort of old news. And I'm more than happy to talk about that with anyone who wishes, but it's been done before by many people, and I don't think we've done anything special since. Now we're concerned about what does that get us. So, more of Jeff Christian's graphs, which we all know and love. This is how it was all meant to work a while ago. Before we run into V4 addresses, V6 deployment will pick up. It hasn't. It hasn't worked. What are we going to do about this gap, lads? What are we going to do? The gap is in fact how I characterise the very problem we have. In particular, we have an amount of time between how we do things today and universal IPv6, and we still don't know really how that's going to work. That means we have three problems. First, we have to deal with IPv4 depletion itself, like we've heard from the previous speakers. V6 will not save us. We can't get V6 deployed in time to solve that problem. We're screwed. It's over. We have to do something about this completely separately to V6, whether we like it or not. We also need to prepare for a world where there is V6 only, and we need to do something about that gap in the middle. So that gives us three different problems to solve, and so three different strands, three different approaches to take all at the same time. They're parallel, they're more or less independent. And this is now how HEAnet are approaching this. For the past, for almost exactly, I think it's 13 months now, we've been following this. And I'll go through them one by one. First question, what do we do about IPv4? 18th of September 2011 is a current prediction for depletion. Of course, that's a rubbish number in the sense of what does that date particularly mean. We'll wake up on that day, and unless you happen to be looking for a request from the first OIR to run out of addresses after that point, and you get told no, then you have a problem, and then 6 months later the guy behind you has a problem, and 2 days after that the guy beside him has a problem. That date itself isn't important, but as well as that, there's going to be changes which mean that that particular date could come in a bit, depending on how the mathematics work out, or if there's a rush. Probably will be. The immediacy of the problem for you or I depends on the rate of our usage. But this can escalate into a crisis. Being we have a dependency on a resource, the resource is no longer there. If we don't deal with this in good time, and then we're likely to have different departments in our own organisations competing for this resource in an uncoordinated way. That's a crisis. So we want to make sure it's in some way coordinated. We can certainly solve any single one of these problems. We can probably solve a few of them. We might even be able to solve all of them one at a time. I'm not confident that we can solve every single one of them and all the others that pop up the weekend after we run out of addresses. And that's what we'll be faced with. And I've no doubt, of course, there are some surprises in there that I haven't accounted for. But we've dealt with a crisis like this before. We've been around this house before. We've dealt with time limited change before, where we had to go laboriously through our network, find things that had a dependency. It was calendar bound rather than event bound, right? But that's not a big deal. It's the same kind of problem. We had services in our business dependent on something that required a workaround. We sorted it out. Probably wasn't a big problem to begin with, but we had checklists which said this is sorted. Checklists. I'm really going to annoy people by being so untechnical with this. That's at least not an Excel spreadsheet, it's an iWork spreadsheet. I'm sure that makes it much better. I was most amused, by the way, earlier when someone asked, so who here has really good backups of the home machine, and all the Mac users put their hands up. What we're going to do, and this is the essence of our first strand of our approach to IPv4 depletion in HEAnet, is, and we're more or less finished this now, we've been doing this for about 6 months, we pretty much have this picture, is list everything we do, which uses IP addresses, work out what they're going to need for 5 years, Okay, 5 years, sure. Like I know what's going to happen in 6 months, but write something down. Pick a workaround if we can't meet those needs. So what I've done is gone to everyone in our company who does any work with IP says you're responsible for some services. What are you responsible for? How many IP addresses do you reckon you need? At least tell me a story about how it scales. Do you have enough to do you no matter how much it scales? Will you need to double for every time you double the users? Will you need to quadruple the users? And then we just get something written down. And we make sure that the workarounds are mutually achievable. Maybe we need to buy a great big NAT box. Maybe we need to do something else. Maybe we don't have a problem for 15 years. But at least I can get that written down. And then, as this picture inevitably changes, we know we can get a handle on the change. And we can get a handle on whether that's going to actually cause a problem. If someone turns out to need 10 times the addresses they thought they did, that's fine. That means I still have the best advance warning I can possibly get that the problem is approaching. The most important thing and the hardest thing I've had to do here was to convince my colleagues that I don't need you to be right. I won't be coming back to you in 3 years' time going, what the hell, you've exceeded your budget of IP addresses, I'm taking that out of your paycheck. It's just about getting people to start thinking in the direction of this is a scarce resource, therefore I need to in some way account for its use. I need to tell someone I'm going to be using it. And I need to have a thought when I'm designing my services about how I'm going to use it. This is completely non-technical. It's basically getting people to think about addresses the same way they already think about money. I know that's really annoying, it annoys the hell out of me because I'm really bad at these predictions. But at least we get the things written down. And that gives us the tools we need to be able to account for that. That's step one. I did mention IPv6 once in describing that step. It has nothing to do with IPv6. We've separated that. We have a question about how we actually get ready properly for IPv6. Get ready, you say. Haven't we done this already? Isn't HEAnet finished? As I said at the start date, HEAnet was done. Well, on the one hand, yes. You know, we came in, 7 years ago now, and dual stacked our entire network and dual stacked the services, and said, right lads, that's it, we're done. Off you go, use IPv6. And guess what the graph looks like? What's the problem? Well, the problem is, at the same time I'm getting a question from the other direction, why can't we just turn off IPv4? And this isn't necessarily coming from my boss who knows better, but we do get people who go, actually we deployed IPv6, and you deployed IPv6, and sure, the problem is solved, you don't need to worry about v4 anymore. We don't. If we were to turn off IPv4 tomorrow, it wouldn't work. The services aren't there. We've reached a technical milestone. Our services are capable of running IPv6. Of course they support IPv4. People still use IPv4. We have to support IPv4. We're not done. The end game here is a working service. So what that gets us strategically is an interesting technical milestone. But what we actually need to finish to make this worthwhile, to make it worth the money we put in, to make it worth the time we put in, is a working service. And I think what we need to aim for here, and this kind of shocks people, we need to be ready to turn off IPv4 in a few years. We need a working internet service running on IPv6, end-to-end, which interoperates with the IPv4 internet. We need to have a client who can come along, connect, and we say to them, you can either have this crappy workaround v4 service, which everyone is now inevitably offering, people at different times, or if you've got a network set up for v6, and only v6, you have a v6 service, and we will get you to the people who haven't sorted this out yet. We need to be able to offer that service. The reason the v6 only part is so important is the definition of our endgame is working service. This means we need a plan to turn off IPv4. This is shocking stuff. I get funny looks when I tell people we're planning to turn off IPv4, you know, in the next few years, you know, sometime after the next Olympics. That's only 3 or 4 years down the road. We are actively making plans to do this, to see if we and how we can do that, what will be necessary to make that happen. The reason I say this is if we don't make a plan turn this thing off, then we will never reach a network that is independent of IPv4. We will always have that dependency. This was a big change in my thinking in the past year. I always thought, like everyone else, well, what we need to do is get a V6 network in place, and then people can migrate over it, and the curve will go like that, and the curve will go like this, and the V4 network will go like that. And it doesn't work like that. Excuse me. That's not how it turns out. Which means that unless we make this active plan, the V4 network is never going to go away, and we will never get the proper benefits from the effort we're putting in here. There are some dependencies in this one. The previous strand, the beauty of it is there are hardly any dependencies on the outside. It's all inside our own organization. This one does a few more. You know, there are things that we need to exist, and the previous presentation suggests that they are existing, and they need to exist and work and be affordable. And we need to be able to make them work end to end. We need to get customers in to make sure that it's actually meeting their needs. And we need to provide them in such a way that we can get them to production. So this will take a bit of time, a bit of coordination, but it's by no means impossible. And that is a pretty much justifiable plan, which says this work is coming into IPv6, we want to keep this up, here's why. That gets us to a working service at the end. But the only way we can justify doing that is if we convince suppliers to deliver and if we convince customers to buy. So we need to solve those problems too. In particular, all those dependencies that have very conveniently stripped out. Where strand 1 is free of dependencies. It solves the V4 problem without any dependencies. We just deal with what we have. Strand 2, we take the stuff that we have a fair idea of how it works and a fair idea of how it will work, refine it a bit, work with industry to make it work, take out all the other dependencies. Why would our customers bother? That's where these dependencies start to clutter. But by separating out dependencies, we've managed to get some good work done in the first 2 strands that contributes to this. And this is already started. I'm hoping some of you are already sitting down going, I've got these services that I run, and my V4 dependency is, we're already starting to think in terms of things like compromises on the V4 service. Our V4 service will change. We've seen examples in the last presentations of the mechanisms that will help us handle V4 depletion, and implicitly how the service will change as a result. We're also able to start to show some measurable progress on a plan that goes, here is where we are today, here is how we get to V6 service, and we're making this kind of progress. Not we're 80% done or we're 30% done, those numbers are rubbish, they're meaningless. But we have these steps to follow, and we've done the first 2 steps. We need to get to a working production V6 service, and we've shown how you can do the translation from operating systems that exist today. Stuff like that. So I don't mean 1% of traffic, I don't mean 10% of users, I don't mean 20% of the man hours put into it. I do mean we have milestones and we've hit some of them. So I think what we've all done in the past and how we've approached the V6 transition is a real scattergun approach. We've got all these straw man arguments, but how many times have I gone to people that and said, so why haven't you deployed IPv6 yet? And they go, oh God, it's Dave. What's my answer today? Well, Google aren't doing IPv6. I'll do it when Google do it. So I came back 6 months ago and went, Google are doing IPv6. You just sign here and we'll sort it out. Oh, if only there was material of dubious academic value, then we deploy IPv6. What we're missing in any of these and all of these, they're all perfectly good arguments on their own, they mean nothing on their own though. What we're missing is any sort of a plan to reach a goal. There's nothing in here which has a clear next step. There's nothing where I can go to Juniper or Cisco and say, if I spend this money, will the IPv6 addresses do anything other than sit in my router on my router interface taking up bytes? What I want to be able to do is go to my customers and say, you and I are going to have this problem, how do we solve it? How do we make a plan to sort of set? So I can go to my suppliers and say, I'm going to give you some money, but you can help us solve this problem in this way, or find a better way.